So I wanted to start a new series here on the podcast and on my YouTube channel all about what I'm doing in music each week. Now, this is kind of multifaceted because I am not just teaching music in one location. I am teaching a variety of situations at the university level, and I'm also teaching a variety of situations with children in a classroom. And both of those sort of part-time positions are making a very full, rich week of teaching with lots of information that I can share with all of you. So the three things that I'm doing at the university level are I'm teaching a methods course for people who want to be music teachers, so elementary methods for music specialists. I'm also teaching and integrating music into the elementary classroom course. So for folks who want to be grade level teachers, like a second grade teacher or a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher, those people are all coming to me to learn how to integrate music into their classrooms. Now, what's interesting about this particular course is it's actually a prerequisite for the School of Education. So these students who are in my class might not actually go on to teach, and they haven't had a whole lot of coursework on education specifically necessarily in terms of like lesson planning and sequencing and all of those types of things. And they definitely haven't had a whole lot of experience singing, but we'll get to that in just a minute. The third thing that I'm doing at the university level is I'm supervising student teachers, and I am teaching a student teacher seminar. Now, this is really powerful because the student that I'm working with this semester is someone who's been with me through methods course 2 years ago, and then they went on to do a field experience in elementary music where I was their supervisor, and now they are doing their student teaching in a different elementary school placement, and it's just really, really special. The other thing that I'm doing outside, but in conjunction with the university teaching, is I'm actually teaching 2 days a week of elementary music. I see all the other students in the building besides middle school and the youngest pre-K students, but I do see all day pre-K. I see kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth and fifth grade combined, because at my campus, if students elect to do band, then they have that during music time. And it's just been a really, really fun experience to be back in the classroom. But I've also been learning a lot. And I've especially been learning a lot because as part of me teaching in the classroom and having my teaching at the university, my university students are actually coming to observe me teach. So that is really exciting because they get to put into practice a lot of what we're talking about in our lecture portion of the course throughout the week, and then they get to see it like literally the next day. So that's been a really exciting thing to have happen this year. So for the last several weeks since school started after Labor Day, in the classroom with students, with elementary age students, and for the sake of talking through these things in these videos on this podcast, I'm going to just lump sixth grade and pre-K in with elementary. Just know that I'm talking about pre-K through sixth grade students. But something that I've been working with all of these students is just how to have music class. I was not their music teacher before this year, obviously, and music existed very, very differently. It existed in a literal different space on the campus than where I am teaching it this year. And so it just looks and feels a lot different. Now, with that comes a lot of excitement because kids love to see new stuff. And with that comes a lot of learning, both for the students and for me. So the last several weeks have really been focused on putting procedures in place, practicing transitions, practicing how to be in a big open space and to stay safe, practicing what it means to use our singing voices, me trying to figure out what types of elements and concepts of music learning they've done and they've worked with and they're familiar with. And so it's just been a big conglomerate of all of that stuff. Now, as part of that, I've gone in and I've tried different activities to see what would work with each of these students. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of these students have never played a singing game in a circle. A lot of them have never held rhythm sticks in their hands. And so learning how to navigate that space in kind of a freer environment than what they're used to in their classroom, and how to navigate manipulatives and how to navigate all of that kind of stuff has been a big learning process. And it's really forced me to kind of try some things and then take a couple steps back and see what I can do differently. And I'll tell you what, on the first day of school, I had to pivot completely. So I was talking to Victoria about this, and stay tuned because we're going to have new episodes of Teaching Music tomorrow coming very, very soon. But we were talking about this the other day about when it's important to pivot and when it's important to push. And ironically enough, this came up when I was talking in my student teaching seminar with a teacher who was asking the same types of questions. And in all of these conversations about when to push, when to pivot, when to follow your plan, when to push through your lesson plan, even though things don't seem to be working for one reason or another, I started to sort of collect some ideas that I think could be meaningful for you as you're going into your teaching today, tomorrow, or whenever it might be. So the first thing is that there's two kind of different reasons to pivot from your planned lesson. So for example, I have this kindergarten lesson plan that I've used the first day of kindergarten for years and years and years and years and years. So I went into this first day of kindergarten feeling cool and confident and like I had things just totally ready to go. And I used a story that was given to me or passed on to my level 2 Kodai class by Brenda Keene, who is my great friend and mentor now. But it's a wonderful story that combines kind of songs that kids know, like the wheels on the bus, and also some new songs that you might use in the first couple of weeks of school with kindergarten, all while combining the use of your name. So by the end of class, students would have heard some familiar songs, they would have maybe learned some new songs or at least heard them, and they would have learned your name, right? Because they only see you that one time a week or those 2 times a week. And so that first week of school, it's really meaningful if you can get those kids to learn your name so that it's not just like, hi, music, when they see you in the hall. So anyway, I went into that first class feeling so cool and so confident and ready to go. Well, about 10 minutes into the lesson, that's 30 minutes long, I kind of had this moment where I just stopped and it was pure chaos. And I mean, controlled chaos, like nobody was getting hurt. There wasn't screaming in the room, but I just didn't have anybody's attention. And it was at this point in the story where we were doing something like Ring Around the Rosie or another type of circle game that my kindergartners were not ready for. We had the parameter of nothing, actually, because at that point my rug hadn't come in yet because it was just like the first day of school and I had ordered a rug and you know how that goes. And so these kids didn't have anything to make a circle around. And I was like, this just isn't working. And so I stopped. I had everybody move to the corner of the room where I had set up a reading chair and some books, and I spent the last half of class singing them a story. And every once in a while, I'd ask them questions about the book, I'd ask them a question about the song, and so they just had a chance to hear my voice, they had a chance to look at something that felt familiar, and it completely changed the vibe of the class. Now, never have I ever made kindergarten into a sing a story time, but honestly, that's what those kids needed that day. It was their way to get used to me. It was a way for me to kind of gather in the class. And even several weeks later, I know that that's something that I can pull out a sing a story book or a song tale with a puppet. And that class just kind of refocuses right away. Now, since then, I've gotten my rug, and so when we go to make a circle, we do not do so in open space. We put our toes on my rectangular rug, and we kind of make a pseudo circle for whatever activity we're going to do. But those kindergarten students still are not ready to make a circle and move in a circle in free space. That type of pivot is a classroom management pivot. It's like when you have a point in your lesson where you're like, this is going off the rails, things are getting out of hand, I need to have a change of pace, I need to go to something familiar, or I just need to do something completely different because what I'm doing right now isn't going to work. If in that moment when I had kids like half standing up, half sitting down, half were trying to sing with me, half were talking, if I would have pushed through and kept trying to do that one game and just said again, things wouldn't have improved. And I recognized in that moment, like, they're just not ready for this. And it was 100% my fault. It was 100% my fault that we had even gotten that far in the lesson where kind of that dysregulation was going on. But I did have the power within myself and the great responsibility, I guess, to say, okay, guys, we need to go and we need to regroup. Come over here. You know what it looks like to sit and read a story. So let's do that. So that's sort of an example of the classroom management, like panic pivot, where things just don't feel like they're going great and it's okay to shift. And it's even greater to have like a couple of things in your back pocket in case today's just not the day for this lesson. And then we go back and we think, all right, so where did things lose control? Where can I take a step back? Where can I resequence? And for me, it was like a circle game just wasn't cutting it in free space. Now, I want to give you another example of maybe not exactly a pivot, but like an addition or another layer or just like a differentiation that happened in sort of real time, and it was a tag team effort. So my college students in my elementary methods course, the one for music specialists, as part of their course, they come in and they observe, and they also have a couple of lesson segments that they teach to students in the classroom. So one of my students sang, "Oh, Watch the Stars, See How They Run," and she used the version from Susan Brumfield's 101 Songs, and I will link that down below. But if you aren't familiar, here is how this song goes. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. The stars run down at the center of the sun. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. And if you're new to the party, I have never claimed to be a trained singer. I am a singer in an educational context, which is a whole thing we can talk about later when we talk about my research interests and my future dissertation and all that stuff. But anyway, that was the song that my student taught to first grade. And she did an absolutely beautiful job sequencing it. It was gorgeous. It was exactly the way she had done it for her peers in class. The kids were all zeroed in on her and they were engaged, and it was just absolutely beautiful. The thing is that this first grade class is sort of a reserved class in situations like this, and they're not, they don't have as much experience singing as maybe other kids do at this point. And so while they were getting the contour, they weren't exactly getting the difference between, oh, watch the stars in the first motive and, oh, watch the stars. And my student did a really, really great job of trying to isolate those two different musical ideas. And then she got to a point where she's like, okay, good job, guys. And she left. And I had told her, I said, when you sing with this class with this particular song, which can be kind of challenging, just know that like if they have the rhythm and the words, like that might be a success for those students. And that's something for you to recognize too as you're looking at a plan with your kids with new song material or whatever it might be. You have to determine what's going to be a success for each individual class and each individual student. So by the time she had stepped away from the front of the room, I said, can we please say thank you to our guest teacher? And the students did. And I said, can we try one more thing? And as I said to my student, it's very easy to watch somebody else teach and think, oh, we could try this. We could try this. We could also try this. Let's see if we can try this. And I just thought to myself, I wonder if the kids had some sort of kinesthetic reinforcement. Would they be able to hear the difference between the two motives? So I asked the students to get out star shining motions, which we can pretend that's what this is. And I asked them to simply follow my motions. And some of them sang with me, some of them didn't, but they were all engaged and thinking. And we did this. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. The stars run down at the center of the sun. Oh, watch the stars, see how they run. And I'll tell you what, once we did that a couple of times, they could hear the difference enough to make the melodic contour, or at least the initial pitch of both of those motives, have a bigger distinction in range. However, it wasn't until the next class where I asked them to sing with their star shining motions where they sang it on pitch. But it did help to scaffold them to that next point. Now, that's an example of a pivot in your plan where, first of all, it was a little bit of teamwork between my student and I, but it was also a moment where I was like, well, what could I do differently? What could I add? What type of scaffold could I add into the sequence to make sure that everybody's kind of getting it? And then, of course, I asked if anybody knew why I was doing it this way down low and then this way up high. And one student raised their hand and said, well, because the pitch was lower here and the pitch was higher here. And I asked her if she took piano lessons, and she said no. So she was just really, really thinking. But anyway, it was a really, really interesting experience to see how just that visual kinesthetic reinforcement with what they were hearing and singing really made a big difference. So that's an example of a pivot that has more to do with sequencing or lesson planning and not so much classroom management. Now, the third experience I had with this sort of idea, or at least thinking in terms of what students are ready for or what they can be most successful with, is when I was teaching just welcoming chants, really, to my elementary methods course for non-majors. And what we were talking about is the different levels of students feeling comfortable saying something sort of as a solo singer or a solo speaker in their class. And so, for example, there's just a very simple chant. I don't know where it comes from. There's lots and lots of different variations, but there's a very simple chant that goes, "My name is Anne," and everybody repeats, "Their name is Anne." And then you go around the circle and everybody says their name, and then the rest of the class says it back to them. Then the next step is saying something like, "My name is Anne and I like pizza." And they could say, "Anne likes pizza." And then it goes around the circle. Then the next step there is to think of something that starts with the same letter as your name. So, "My name is Anne and I like apples." Anne likes apples. Then kind of taking a step back to not having the same letter, another way to differentiate this is to say, "My name is Anne, I'm from Michigan, and I like pizza." Right? So none of those lined up with the alliteration with the A, but you still had to think of a lot of things and say it on your own. And then everybody repeats, "Anne likes pizza," right? Then the next step there is to say, "My name is Anne, and I come from Antarctica, and I like apples." All of that begins with an A, and I started the chant with "My name is Anne." So I started it with the A. But what I was trying to point out to my students who have had very little experience lesson planning and very little experience thinking about sequencing and scaffolding is all of the different directions that an activity like this could take and how it could be scaffolded for students who are ready for different things, whether it's because they're older or just because they're more comfortable in their bodies and with their voice and sharing in front of a group and all those other kind of factors that play into what we do in a community music making situation. So there can be a little bit of push and pivot in the moment, absolutely, or afterwards or beforehand, so that you can plan for those inevitable moments when your plan doesn't go according to plan. Something that I often tell all of my students, all of my teacher students, is that when you are lesson planning, it's really powerful to script. And this is something that I've talked about a lot on the podcast and in other places. But this idea of scripting is not so that you can write a script and memorize it and follow it, because then you're not being responsive to whatever the student feedback is that you're getting. But the point of scripting a lesson is really to think clearly about your lesson objective and then to reverse engineer, or your lesson segment objective, whatever activity you're doing for that day, where do you want to go, and then reverse engineer back to where students can start feeling successful and slowly add layers upon layers upon layers. So as you go forward this week in your teaching and in your lesson planning, I really encourage you to consider some of those places where you might push through your lesson plan because you can pivot according to the sequence, or maybe you just need to pivot in a completely different manner to a completely different activity, just so that your students have a change of pace because they need that in order to be successful. Because that's definitely what I learned in music this week.